Why, hello there, old sports, and welcome to yet another Silksong challenge video. And this might be the last one I do for a while because, I'm gonna be honest, I don't have that many ideas. Anyways, after trying and failing to beat the game with only Rune Rage, I saw a comment that suggested I beat the game with only Sawtooth Circlet, and I thought, hey, that sounds interesting. And the funny thing about that is I've actually already tried to do this challenge like 2 or 3 times before, but I always gave up on it because I wasn't really that interested in it. And I really only got past like Lace 1 in the deep docks. So I thought might as well give it an actual try. For those who don't know, the Sawtooth Circlet is a blue slot tool that you can use in tandem with the Fade Down or Drifter's Cloak to spawn a little hitbox around you when you flare up the cloak or double jump. The tool does pretty good damage, but you're going to end up having to mash the hell out of the jump button if you want to actually get anything done. Now, since you obviously need the Drifter's Cloak or Fade Down Cloak to even use the tool, I'm starting myself out with both the Drifter's Cloak and the Sawtooth Circlet, so the challenge can actually happen. With that all established, let's begin the challenge. Getting into the meat of this challenge, the first thing I want to talk about is this little arena in the Hunter's March before you get Swift Step, or the Sprint/Dash ability, and that's because the really big downside of this tool is it's hard to hit targets that are low to the ground. This thing does really good damage and is really easy to hit airborne enemies, but the Sawtooth Circlet really struggles against grounded enemies, and especially ones that are just really tiny or low to the ground. You have to be really careful that you use the jump button right before you hit the ground, because do it too early and the tool will activate too high up and you'll miss, do it too low and you'll hit the ground and you won't activate the cloak/tool. Thankfully, most of the bosses in this game are bigger targets, so that means this is going to be a pretty easy god damn it. Okay, now being completely honest, Lace in the deep docks isn't that bad. It's mostly when we get to the Cradle is when she becomes a real problem, but that's for later, and now is now. Looking back on the footage, really the only reason Lace was even pretty manageable at this point in the game was just because, 1, she moves a lot slower compared to the version of her in the Cradle, and 2, our damage is actually pretty nuts, because before this fight I did the little deep docks arena and bought the first tool upgrade from Forge Daughter that upgrades our tool damage, and that does scale, or Sawtooth Circlet's damage does scale with that stat, so it was pretty easy to buff our damage. And then also, considering the fact you're not supposed to even get this tool until the Underworks, the fact that we're using it on pre-Act 2 bosses is really not the best for them, to be completely honest, so we're able to melt her pretty quickly. But even in this first fight with her, I was kind of running into the issue of, because she moves around so much, sometimes we'll run into her accidentally and then take contact damage. Some of her attacks are really hard to move around, and just don't get caught in the parry, because it will hurt a lot. Okay, now this next part is a bit complicated and ended up not mattering that much, but I feel like I should explain anyway. I decided I was going to try to unlock as many new crests as I could so I could use memory lockets on them to unlock more tool slots, with the end goal of eventually unlocking the blue Ventacrest at Eva. And what that would do is obviously give us another blue tool slot. So I was hoping I could try to use more blue tools, I guess. Now, ultimately I didn't actually end up unlocking it, but it was a while before I gave up on that plan, so I decided to actually kill the Best Savage Beastfly for the Beast Crest before moving on to the 4th chorus, and thus Greymore. And the funny thing here is that I actually ended up beating the Savage Beastfly no hit on my first attempt, which I kind of want to flex about a little, just because I know people struggle with this boss normally. So the fact that I was doing a challenge run and no hit it on my first try is actually, I feel like it's pretty cool. But then again, I have no hit this boss multiple times, so it really isn't that cool. I just sound like an idiot. But that's nothing new. Now again, this doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because I kind of gave up on the whole blue Ventacrest plan. But I did end up, well, I didn't actually end up ever going to Eva, so I could have unlocked the yellow Ventacrest looking back at my save file and seeing how many tool slots I had unlocked, but I never actually ended up doing that, and it's not like I would have gotten anything out of that anyway, so my bad. Actually, now that I think about it, I was an idiot because I could have unlocked the magnetic dice and that probably would have helped me a lot later on, but I never ended up doing that. I'm an idiot. Anyways, moving on. Unnecessary detours aside, next up is the fourth chorus, and like I said, I was going to try to kill it just to try to feel like I'm not completely cheating this challenge, because I could skip it because I gave myself the Drifter's Cloak at the start, but I decided that I was just going to try my best to fight it anyways. And the funny thing is, it was actually pretty hard to actually get onto the arena, because the fourth chorus is programmed to spawn once you get the Drifter's Cloak, and part of that spawning thing is that it deactivates some of the platforms next to the arena so you can't just jump off of it. So I had to like do this funny little float thing and then grab onto the edge of the arena before I fell into the lava, so that was kind of funny. And ironically, I took more damage there trying to get onto the arena than I actually did fighting the fourth chorus, because yet again, I no-hit this boss on my first try. Now this fight was just tedious, if anything, because the Sawtooth Circlet's hitbox isn't very tall, so we have to wait for the fourth chorus to attack to lower its head, and then also when it's doing the rock falling attack, where it like slams its hands into the ceiling, we can't damage it there either, because unlike a normal run where we could just upswing with our nail, or needle I guess, we have to wait for it to lower its head again, so that's basically just 20 seconds of just waiting. So there's just a lot of waiting in this fight, it's pretty tedious, but other than that, the fight was pretty easy. Now I'm not going to sugarcoat it, this challenge has been pretty easy so far, and like I said during the Lace fight, that kind of comes down to just how absurd our damage is for this point in the game. Add on to that the toolkit upgrade I mentioned, and again, we're just mowing through these enemies pretty quickly, because if we do little short hops and then flare the cloak, land, short hop, flare the cloak, we can actually activate it pretty quickly, and considering the fact that we are supposed to have a base needle at this point in the game, the fact that we're doing like 15 something damage a strike is pretty ridiculous. Again, keep in mind that our base needle only does 5 damage, so the fact that we're doing 15, 14 damage here, we're doing almost 3 times our DPS, so the fact that we're slower, or I mean like our attack is slower than normal, doesn't really mean much when we're hitting 3 times as hard, so our damage is still better than it would be anyways. On top of that, a lot of the exploring sections aren't very eventful because I'm either doing quests or just ignoring everything in my path and just running past it as quickly as possible. That's why I've been mostly going over bosses so far, just because everything else isn't really interesting, because it would just be me saying, oh yeah, I sprinted by a group of enemies for the umpteenth time in a row. Even the Moorwing wasn't really even a problem. I did get down to 2 or 3 HP depending on how you count the Fractured Mask, but again, that was just because I was being sloppy, it wasn't even really that difficult. The Moorwing is a big enemy that's airborne, so it's pretty easy to hit it. Again, the only thing comes down to is just dodging, and when you're being sloppy and trying to rush the boss down as quickly as possible, you're gonna take a few hits. But other than that, it didn't really matter that much because I was just able to defeat it pretty quickly. Even most of Shellwood was pretty easy because again, most of the enemies are either airborne or pretty tall, so not too much of a challenge. But speaking of a boss that was actually interesting, we have Sister Splinter. And while yes, I still did no-hit her on my first try, I at least had to fight for it. I had to put some effort in for that achievement. Due to the way Sister Splinter moves so suddenly and quickly, and due to the fact that she's a double damage contact boss, the safest time to attack her is when she does her triple swipe. So what you want to do is hit her arm while it's like swiping downwards because her hitbox extends downwards, so it's easier to hit her there. And then you just try to hit her 2 or 3 times, 1 per swipe, and then rinse and repeat as she does that. Try to break the vines as you can, or when you can with the cloak, because it only takes 2 or 3 hits to destroy the vines. And then when she starts summoning the spinner enemies, you want to hit them as they spawn in, and then bait out a spin attack from them, and then hit them when they're done attacking, so they don't block it with their tornado invincibility frame, whatever. I don't know what the technical term for it, I'm just kind of making up terms here on the spot. But you can see what I mean by looking at the footage. My strategy for this fight was to just attack Sister Splinter when there was no additional enemies on screen, and then when the additional enemies spawned, I would focus them down as quickly as possible, because it's a lot easier to dodge attacks when you only have to deal with 1 enemy, instead of 3 independently moving enemies, obviously. Now if you wanted, you could try to hit Sister Splinter when she's not attacking, But like I said, if she decides to move while you're trying to attack her, there's a pretty good chance you'll get hit if she like dashes into you. So it's best to just wait until she's attacking and then attack then. But otherwise, this fight isn't too difficult. It can be a bit overwhelming if you're not careful, but I would say it's pretty easy. Just try to deal with any additional threats as they pop up before focusing back on Sister Splinter herself, because she can only summon so much at once. After grabbing the Wall Cling ability, I rush straight towards Widow and proceed to beat her on my first attempt. However, this time, I didn't do it no hit, so I think that means the game's getting harder. I'm not sure. The problem with Widow is just that she's really tall, so it's really easy to hit her with the Sawtooth Circlet. And she stands still just enough to get 1 or 2 hits off on her before she dashes away again. So again, it's just, this boss is, you feel like it'd be harder, but it has a lot going towards you, or a lot in your favor, and a lot working against it. However, the bell attacks can be really difficult to dodge, because, especially the angled ones, because they're easier to dodge when you're on the ground, but when you're in the air, like you have to be to activate the attack, it's kind of harder to dodge them. So at least Widow has that going for her, I guess. Fortunately for us, once we defeat Widow and free Bellheart, we get access to the Bellheart quest board, where we can take up a quest from the guy who owns the little bar in Greymoor, and then if we get a bunch of crow pelts for him, he can build a scarecrow, and then he'll give us a toolkit upgrade in exchange, which means we're doing even more ridiculous damage than beforehand. So, yippee, I guess. There's only 2 more tool upgrades we can get, and one of them is for Grindle, and we need the Faydown Cloak to get that, and the other is from the Architect and the Underworks. So it'll be a while till we get any more combat upgrades, or damage upgrades, I guess, but it's not really like we need them for a bit. Before moving on to the final boss of Act 1, I decided to go to the Wormways to get the Plasnium Vial. I figured since it was pretty much the only red tool I would be able to use, it was worth the time to go and grab it. And thankfully it was, because for as long as I used it, it gave me just enough survivability to defeat a few bosses here or there. Now eventually it completely stopped working, but that's for later. And now, it's time for the final boss of Act 1, Phantom. For this run, I decided to take on Phantom instead of the Last Judge as my final boss before the Citadel, and even though Last Judge probably would have been easier because she's taller, and lots of her attacks cause her to stand still, I just figured I should fight Phantom because I like being able to enter the Citadel on the eastern side where you have access to the Bell Station immediately. I also wanted more of a challenge, which is why I decided to fight Phantom specifically. Now, yes, that didn't stop me from defeating her on the first attempt, but I'm just saying, I'm getting closer to actually struggling here. I did use my lifeblood vials, but I didn't need to. I had enough health to tank a couple more attacks, but I felt like I needed to use my lifeblood vials, so I feel like we're getting closer to a fight actually being a threat here, so that's good, I think. Even though I only got hit by it once, the attack that kind of stressed me out the most was the parry, because due to the fact that we have to wait till we land on the ground to move again, if we activate the parry, we are going to get hit because we're so close to hitting the ground, and then there's that little bit of landing lag, and then also you're still in the air. Or I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, if you're trying to attack and activate the parry, you're probably going to get hit 9 times out of 10. Thankfully, most of Phantom's attacks are pretty easy to dodge. Sometimes it's just a bit misleading with where you think her hitbox will be, because when she dashes towards her long pin, sometimes you'll dodge the pin and you'll think, oh, I'm fine, and then she'll hit you and you'll be like, oh, I in fact was not fine. But regardless, eventually Phantom goes down, and we hit the halfway mark of this challenge. Because I'm only going up to Grandmother Silk and feeding her for the Act 2 ending, I'm not doing the Act 3 ending in this video. I might do that if this video gets enough views and people want me to do it, but seeing how my last few Silksong videos have gone, I probably won't end up doing it, so I don't know if that's good or bad for me. Anyways, we'll see. Once I reach the Citadel, I sprint straight towards the Cogwork dancers, and thankfully, this fight was actually pretty difficult. I died once on it. So, at least we've died once to a fight now. Regardless, this fight is actually pretty tough, but that's only partially because I'm impatient and don't want to wait for the dancers to line up into a safe position before I attack them. I just want to attack them every moment I have, even if that moment isn't necessarily safe. This fight is built around watching where the dancers will go and then acting accordingly, but the funny thing is that if you fight these guys enough, eventually you'll kind of learn their movement patterns, and you'll get to a point where you can predict like 2 moves in a row before they even get one of them off. So that's pretty good. It just means that you have to be careful, because if you know they're going to do a quick attack after they do one attack, or if they're going to do like an attack that would get you hit, you shouldn't try to get 2 or 3 hits in with the Sawtooth Circlet. You should only get 1 in and then dodge, because if you try to get 2 or 3 hits in, they'll hit you. The first and second phase weren't that bad, but the third phase where they desync was kind of rough, and that's just because they start jumping at weirder angles that are harder to predict, because at least when they were in sync, the angles they're at they feel a lot more fixed. And I'm sure they only have a certain amount of angles they can go at from every position in the desync phase, but it just feels like the angles are more random, I guess. And even if they aren't random, I guess I just felt like that, and sometimes it's not about what's actually happening, it's about how you feel things are happening, because your brain can kind of trick you into believing some pretty dumb stuff. Just look at Twitter. I ended the fight with my shattered mask broken, and only at 1 HP, and that's after using my lifeblood vial, so I'm glad I had it because it really saved me there. But thankfully, now that the dancers are done with, we can explore most of the rest of the Citadel, because the Cogwork core that you get access to after the dancers leads to most of the Citadel that you can't get to from the beginning of Act 2. If we want to reach the portion of the Underworks where the last architect resides with our damage upgrade, we need to get through Trobio. And Trobio, this fight just is, he just stalls a lot. That's the only problem with this fight. I died a couple times, but it's just because this fight goes on for so long. This fight was about like 5 minutes long. I died 4 times on this fight, and like I said, it's just because you get worn down over having to fight him for so long, and there's not very many safe opportunities to attack him. The worst attack he can do is his tornado attack, because you just have to wait through it. You can't safely attack him during it, and if you try to attack him when the tornado attack ends, the little tornadoes that come from the sides will hit you, and that's kind of where you need to be to activate the circlet, so that's not a safe opportunity to attack, like I said. And even if you wait the attack out, usually once the tornadoes spawn, he'll dash backwards away from you, so you can't even get a follow-up attack. You just need to wait for him to do a different attack to try to punish. Something else I haven't really had to bring up much because it wasn't really relevant is that we can't heal under normal circumstances. Because we're not hitting enemies with our needle, we're not gaining silk, which means we can't heal. The only way we can heal in this fight is if we die, and then come back to the fight, and break the cocoon to get a full bind's worth of silk, so we can heal exactly once. So we can make 1.5 mistakes when it comes to fights that do 2 masks of damage. So that's terrible. Yes, I have been able to no-hit most of the bosses in this game, but that was when I was using literally every tool I had at my disposal to beat them down as quickly as possible before they could retaliate. The more time you have to dodge, the more opportunities you have to make a mistake, and Trobio really takes advantage of that in this fight. However, eventually he goes down, and we're free to move on to the Underworks to get Clawline and the second to last toolkit upgrade. Okay, so continuing the pattern of not sugarcoating things, the High Hall's Gauntlet was terrible, as usual. Now if you're looking at the footage, 2 things may jump out at you pretty quickly. The first one is that my lifeblood syringe is empty. Now you may be thinking, oh, just go back to the alchemist and fill the backup reserve up. I have like 20 out of 20. I don't know why the lifeblood syringe isn't filling. The game like glitched out or something. I tried going back to the alchemist and like trying to refill it. I tried using the syringe as much as I could. I tried switching crests. I tried switching which of the red slots the syringe was in. Nothing worked. Apparently Hornet just decided she wanted to go clean and didn't want to use lifeblood anymore. Or plasmium, I guess. So that was terrible. So the crutch I had been relying on the past few fights just decided to be like, nah, no more. No. And I was like, but I need this. And the syringe was like, how about no. So after the lifeblood syringe decided to go out for some milk and never come back, I decided that I might as well get the Faydown cloak so I could get the last toolkit upgrade from Grindel. But the problem with that plan is that once I went to Mount Fay and got the Faydown cloak, I ran into the issue of, oh, the Faydown cloak has different, it has a different feel to it than just using Drifter's cloak with Sawtooth Circlet. So I basically had to throw all the muscle memory I had formed on how to use the tool right in the trash, and learn it completely over from scratch, in one of the hardest arenas in the whole game, so that's terrible. And while I do stand by the fact that using Fade Down Cloak and Sawtooth Circlet isn't very good, if you use the double jump and then flare the cloak to go into the drifting mode, you can do 2 hits back to back pretty quickly. So that's like really the only upside of using Fade Down Cloak with Sawtooth Circlet. Otherwise, just don't bother, it's not very good. Because the Sawtooth Circlet goes at like an angle where it goes like up, it's tilted upwards in front of you and downwards behind you, or like whichever way Hornet is facing. So it's really hard to hit enemies closer to the ground because the thing is going over their head, or it like tilts just enough to like go over their head. It's so annoying. So what I had to do is I had to like double jump into the air, and then as I was falling, try to use the Drifter's Cloak Sawtooth Circlet attack to hit the low to the ground enemies. It was just awful. This arena was terrible. Thankfully, I remembered to get rid of the Claw Maidens, or if you don't know which enemies those are like the little spider guys who will sap your silk from you and then form those like spears that they'll throw at you. Those like floaty guys. You can actually disable them in the high halls by going towards a secret area, and then you can like just destroy them and they won't appear anymore in the Citadel, so that's a thing you should always do. And you need the Fade Down Cloak to actually access the secret room. But even getting rid of those guys barely helped, so this whole gauntlet was just a mess, I'm gonna be honest. If I were to estimate how many times I died here, it would have to be over 50 or 60. So the huge bulk of my deaths in this challenge went to this gauntlet alone. It was terrible. I had to delete a lot of footage because I had to just keep stopping recording because my hard drive was getting close to filling up, so I had to stop the recording, delete all the footage, start again, fail for another 3 hours, stop the footage, delete it, start recording for another 3 hours. You get what I'm trying to get at here. Honestly, the worst part of the gauntlet for me was the ending part with the 2 choir clappers, which are the huge guys with the mallets. They were just so annoying because it felt like their attacks would overlap in just the right way to damage me in ways I couldn't avoid. And maybe that was just me being impatient, but it was so annoying to get this fight over with. But eventually I was able to manage it, and then I was able to get the last melody, and from here, we can move on to the final 2 bosses of the game. I mentioned earlier that Lace 2 was much more of a problem than Lace 1, and I stand by that because this fight was very difficult. Like I said during the fight with her in the deep docks, Lace moves just slow enough to where you can safely get attacks off on her, but in the Cradle, she be zoomin'. And the other thing too is that when she's attacking more often, that means she'll parry more often, and the parry is very dangerous for us because it's harder to see it coming when she's moving faster, and what ends up happening is you basically have to do a Fear and Hunger style coin flip, where you either get to dodge the attack if she does the follow-up where she jumps behind you in the air, but if she does the grounded follow-up, 9 times out of 10 you're going to get hit and lose 2 masks, so that's not good. So after throwing myself against this fight for like half an hour, I decided to take a break to eat some spaghetti, and I came up with a pretty simple solution to this fight. If Lace is moving fast enough to be a problem, we just simply move faster. Just simply try to keep up with her speed, and attack her as often and as soon as you can, so she can't ever get a parry off. It's easy, and by easy I mean this was very hard to pull off. This fight mostly solved the parry issue, mostly, but it still took a lot of like dexterity and skill to actually pull this strategy off, and that was really the difficult part. If you're curious, the 2 easiest attacks to punish were her aerial like lunge where she'll jump into the air and then dash downwards at an angle. That attack is easy to punish, and then the other easy attack to punish is her like triple swipe forwards. Her lunge attack is kind of difficult to punish, especially once she goes into phase 2 and 3 where she can start dashing multiple times in succession, or she can even follow it up with the aerial lunge. So it's usually just good to wait until that attack is over to try to punish her, or just wait till she does one of the other previously mentioned attacks that are easy to punish. Now the funny thing here is that even though Lace and the High Halls Gauntlet were both very difficult, I'd say Lace was a lot more fun, or at least this fight with Lace was a lot more fun, because even though it was hard, it was like a fun challenge. It didn't feel like the game was screwing me over. It felt like I had to use my limited tools as well as I could, and it felt like I had to really use skill expression instead of just hoping the two clappers didn't decide to just screw me over. So this fight was actually really fun. I would recommend trying this. Actually, I wouldn't recommend it, because maybe I'm desensitized to how stupid these challenges are. Anyways, on to Grandmother Silk. Okay, now the fight with Grandmother Silk was comically easy. In fact, I almost no-hit it on my first try, because I beat it on my first try, I just got hit once near the end of the fight. Now the reason this fight is so comically easy is just because Grandmother Silk is an airborne enemy, who moves around pretty slowly, and she can only really move horizontally. And the thing is, the Sawtooth Circlet hitbox is very wide, so even when she tries to dash away from us, half the time we can still hit her anyways. Also, the trick I mentioned where you can do one hit with the double jump and then immediately use the cloak to do a second hit in quick succession, that trick is very effective on GMS. This fight took me a little under 2 minutes, and I'm sure it's probably closer to 1.5 minutes of actual fighting if we cut out the intro waiting for this fight to start and the little middle part where she fades off the screen before coming back for the second phase. I think it's funny that this is the second challenge run I've done where Lace in the Cradle has provided more of a challenge than her own mother. And I think that's funny. Like, I'm not even talking Lost Lace here, I'm talking Lace 2. Originally, my plan in the script was just to do a little gag here where I was going to be like, and I beat Grandmother Silk on my first try, okay, bye. But last time I did that, people got kind of frustrated because they didn't get to see the fight, and I understand that, so I'm showing it off the fight now here. But anyway, I've proved the challenge is possible. I feel like this challenge wasn't very challenging, but I saw one person wanted me to do this challenge, and I figured might as well give it a try. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have watched to the end of this video, I really appreciate your time today. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'd like to thank my 3 Patreon members, Skill Issue, Sven Biscuit, and Iconic Cat, for being supporters, because it really means a lot to me, and I appreciate that you're willing to give me some of your money. That means a lot to me, like I said. And I am going to end the video. I don't know how to end this video, because I feel like I kind of had to rewrite the ending of the script here, because, again, like I was going to have a gag here. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you're having a good day. All that good stuff. See you on the flip side, I guess. Bye-bye.